Wonderful. Well, good evening. I'm Annalisa Conway. I'm the Chief Engagement Officer here at the New Bedford Whaling Museum, and it's a pleasure to welcome you tonight. As a reminder, but before we begin, I want to thank all of the members who are here, and thank you for joining us for our programs. As a reminder, members receive 50% off all of our programs, like tonight's screening. Oh, I'm sorry, can you hear now? Okay. I was just saying there's a lot of benefits to being a member, so you may want to join if you aren't already. And we have a packed program calendar coming up, so keep in mind we have AHA this Thursday with a old-time fiddle session. You can come and play or just listen and enjoy. Our 123rd annual members meeting is taking place on May 20th. And this year's first Portuguese Lusophone World Lecture Series kicks off, no pun intended, with a soccer-focused panel discussion hosted by John Gonsalves from WJFD, and featuring two Lhasa legends, Carlos Medina, coming in from Cabo Verde, and Lucio Santos, just up the street in Taunton. And they will be joined by Yasmina Carvalho, and she's the future of soccer at Bridgewater State University. She's been there for 14 years as the head women's coach. So mark your calendar for May 28th for that. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. Please silence your phone and take a note to look at the emergency exits to your left and right. And I am honored to introduce tonight our speakers and just a little bit about the film. The Petal Pusher, directed by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and filmmaker David Abel, has had a limited and carefully curated release. We are so fortunate to be screening it here tonight. The film premiered at Doc NYC in 2025, one of the country's leading documentary festivals, and has since screened at Sedona International Film Festival, the International Film Festival of Boston, and a number of invited institutional venues, garnering accolades and attention along the way. An ode to New York's Penn Station and one of its longest-running small businesses, The Petal Pusher reflects on the economics of love and desperation and on a bygone era before the station's transformation into a mall of chain stores. At its heart, this is a deeply personal story about love, loss, family, and the dignity of work. Following the screening, we will be joined by the filmmakers for a discussion and audience Q&A. Tonight's moderator really needs no introduction. Mayor John Bullard, someone who knows New Bedford inside and out. John Bullard is the president of the board of the New Bedford Ocean Cluster. He retired in 2018 as regional administrator for NOAA Fisheries, where he was responsible for the management of all living marine resources in federal waters from Maine to Cape Hatteras, just a small little area off the coast. John ran NOAA's Office in Sustainable Development for the Clinton administration in Washington after serving as mayor of New Bedford from 1986 to 1992. Before that, he worked for 12 years leading the effort to revitalize the Waterfront Historic District. John is on the board of the Buzzards Bay Coalition, the Westport Planning Board, and is co-founder of the New Bedford Light. He has a degree from Harvard and advanced degrees from MIT. And he is recently featured in the viral sensation podcast, Catching the Codfather, and is author of Hometown, his own story about family legacy and place. We missed him last week at the Time Capsule event, but we are thrilled to have him tonight guiding our conversation. A round for John, please. David Abel is a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter at the Boston Globe and a professor of the practice at Boston University. Abel's work has won an Edward R. Murrow Award, the Ernie Pyle Award from the Scripps Howard Foundation, and the Sigma Delta Chi Award for feature reporting. His films include the Emmy-nominated Entangled, which was broadcast on PBS, and other award-winning films such as In the Whale, Inundation District, Lobster War, and Sacred Cod. Abel, who began learning to make films as a Neiman Fellow at Harvard University, is the Petal Pusher's producer, director, writer, and cinematographer. And he has a children's book coming out called The Lost and Found, any day now, about a cold-stunned sea turtle and his recuperation at the New England Aquarium. So, round for David. And Mark Chesek, from the North Pole to Miami Beach, Chesek has been cutting documentaries for more than 30 years. His editing credits include Crash of Flight 111 for Nova, Dangerous Prescription for Frontline, Surviving Mars for the Discovery Channel, as well as numerous shows for the History Channel, Nat Geo, NBC Sports, and the DIY Network. He recently was the finishing editor for the Frontline program in the Age of AI and has collaborated on several short festival films. Chesek has taught film editing at Emerson College, Boston University, the Maine International Film Television Workshops, Future Media Concepts, and at Harvard University's Department of Art, Film, and Visual Studies. Finally, since I know I'm standing between you and an incredible film discussion tonight, you may have seen the beautiful display as you arrived. Always in Bloom is a locally owned flower shop in Marion, Massachusetts, run by a mother-daughter team with roots in Cape Verde. Known for fresh, joyful arrangements and a warm, personal touch, they have supplied us with flowers for purchase after the show. Don't miss the chance to take something beautiful home. Thank you for joining us, and please enjoy the show.
Did you enjoy that? Another round of applause for the people who brought us this pleasure tonight. Thank you, David. Thank you, Mark. That was really amazing. And I feel very lucky to have watched that. I have a list of about 20 questions that I was going to ask David and Mark, but I'm guessing you all have some questions too. So I'll just start with a couple of questions, warm it up so you'll learn it's not that difficult to ask a question. And then when I call on you, you raise your hand and say, I have a question, okay? Is that a deal? All right. David, you've done amazing work in filmmaking with incredible range. I mean, the last airboat captain in Florida, In the Whale, a whole bunch of films on marine subjects near and dear to my heart, the inundation district about the seaport, just such incredible range. And if you haven't seen any of these films, you need to go find them because they're all really good. But in those films, you're kind of an outside storyteller. And now this is a little closer to home, isn't it? Yeah. It's like losing my father a second time. Oh, how hard was it to make this film, David?
That's a wonderful question. And before I answer that question, let me just say thank you to everyone here at this amazing place, my favorite museum. I couldn't be more thankful to have the opportunity to bring this film, which is a very obviously personal and different kind of film than I've ever made before. And I just thank you so much for thinking of bringing this short film and for all of you coming out here. I think almost all of my films I have played here, and it's particularly special to bring this home here, and it feels like home. And John, who is in almost all of my films, with the exception of this one, I'm surprised you didn't get a cameo in this somehow.
I don't know how you could make a film without me, David.
There's something that felt missing about that. But thank you for doing this and for being here. But to answer John's very on-point question, I'll turn it to sort of explain Mark's role here. So I shot most of this footage almost 10 years ago, and And I started shooting when my mom told me she was going to shut the business down. And for me, that, as you saw in the film, was really hard and painful for so many reasons. I grew up in this very distinct, rat-infested, roach-infested place where anything could happen at any moment, and that just created just so much energy. And to be there on a day like Valentine's Day or Mother's Day, and this is such a perfect Mother's Day film, so thank you for thinking of it for Mother's Day. It just brought my family together, and it was a way of me holding on to my dad, who had died some years before my mom finally felt like she had to close down the business, which was fueled in part, a decision that was fueled in part by all of these renovations, these long deferred and needed renovations in a lot of ways to Penn Station. It, to me, though, feels now kind of like a shiny mall, more than I kind of had this almost love for this really dingy, dark, but full of life place. And so, fast forward to about a year ago, I no longer am a full-time reporter at the Boston Globe. I'm still writing for them, but I now mainly teach at Boston University. And when I was in college, I wonder if you did this, John, but I love to learn. That's one of the reasons why I became a journalist. And when I was in college, I used to just, when I could, sit in on classes and just go to lectures and ask the professors if they wouldn't mind if I did something called audit their class. And so when I became a professor at Boston University and heard that there was this really amazing editor teaching an advanced film editing class, I thought, I'm back in college. Maybe I can audit his class. And so at the beginning of the semester, shortly, I don't know if it was it might have been my first semester at BU.
Should I chime in? Check, 1, 2.
Yeah.
I think, you sent me an email, and then I was searching your name, and I realized you'd been trying to get a hold of me in the fall semester. I think it was spring of 23.
So it was the next semester.
Yeah, and then I was like, my classes are, 16 undergrads in a cinder block building in Kenmore Square with fluorescent lighting. And, so I'm it's a lovely environment. It's a very romantic, lovely, welcoming environment. And so I looked at David's portfolio, and I was like, you really want to hang out with me and 16 undergrads at night in Kenmore Square? And I figured, he's probably going to last 2 or 3 classes. And he had perfect attendance. And in the meantime, David was working on Inundation District and was still finishing up In the Whale. And so then, after class, I would look at some of the cuts, some of the scenes, and then it's like, oh, you live in Jamaica Plain? I live in Jamaica Plain. And then we went out and had a beer, and...
Yeah, and then we started talking about, after I'd finished these other films, what might be next, and I talked about this footage that I had that I hadn't looked at in years, in part because, and this is a very long-winded answer to your question. We're switching tables here, right? But in short, I was reminded of this footage, and I thought, who would care about this? It's just a story about my family. And Mark encouraged me to start looking at it more seriously, and when I did that, I sort of felt like there was probably something bigger to say. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Mark, for sitting with me every step of the way and helping me bring this film into life.
You're welcome, David.
I love this role reversal.
I'm usually the one who asks John the questions.
Interrogated by David on so many occasions. That is, you didn't answer my question, David. That's what you used to say to me, as I wandered around. trying to escape your question. I asked, because this is so close, was it tougher to make?
Yeah, I didn't answer your question.
Yeah.
So
I'm not going to let you get away
thank you,
with that.
thank you. I appreciate you making sure I answer the question. Yes, in a lot of ways, it was a more difficult film to make. At first, I wanted no part of having my face or being in this film in any way, shape, or form. It just felt wrong and totally different than any kind of film I've made before. And Mark sort of prodded me.
Well, also, you were taking classes with Ross McElwee at Harvard, the master of putting himself in.
True. That's, I don't know if they'll know who Ross McElwee is, but anyway, the reality was that Mark encouraged me and thought that that it had to be sort of that. But I want to answer your question. It was hard, but it was also an incredibly cathartic experience.
Yeah.
It was a way for me to hold on to this place. And we've had a lot of really special screenings over the years. Entangled, my film, came out during the pandemic, and we had a virtual screening, which was this really awful experience. And then at the tail end of the pandemic, my last film, In the Whale, came out, and we showed it in the Provincetown Film Festival, and it was just everything you hope a film premiere would be, which is we had hundreds of people who hadn't come to gather in a public space in years at that point, and it just was amazing and riveting and thrilling to be in a place and hear what moved people and watch people sort of laugh. And I'm telling you the story because one of the most moving experiences of my life was the premiere of this film, which was a few months ago at this film festival in New York City. And I brought my mom to watch the film for the first time, my sister, my extended family, and all the workers who we hadn't seen in years. And they all came out, and it was just this incredible experience to share this film and sit next to my mom and have this very personal story be on the big screen.
Thank you,
And-
David.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Mark.
was going to just add, and Sammy C. Davis, who looms large in this film, also showed up with a chauffeur.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
And it meant the extra free ticket was not available for my friend, so we had to scalp a ticket on the streets.
Yeah.
But
Yes, Sammy Davis is now like my best friend. He calls me all the time. He filmed the film during the premiere and put it online, and I had to tell him that wasn't a cool thing to do.
Well, David, we all of us in New Bedford are so happy that you love New Bedford and you've shown your films here. And that you have strong feelings for this place. But I do have to say, when you described Penn Station as roach-infested in a kind of negative way, as
No,
you
not
know,
negative.
New Bedford is roach-infested. I am a roach. And they were in the whaling industry.
Yes, yes.
Which reminds me of David interviewing me for Entangled, and he gave me all these normal questions about how to save right whales and so on and so forth. And then he waited till the end to say, so John, with the camera right here, how do you feel that your ancestors brought all these whales to the brink of extinction and the roaches? So David, I have been thinking for several days now about a way to get even with you. And if the audience doesn't ask any questions, I'm going to do my best. But Mark, I have a question for you. This was 16-minute film. I assume you started with at least like 30 minutes of footage. How much film was there, and how do you go about figuring out what's the right 16 minutes?
That was a struggle for both of us because there were a lot of things left on the cutting room floor. The death of David's father during leading up to Valentine's Day. There's a whole chapter of David's father buying a farm in the Dominican Republic. It's not a lot of footage of that. So, and then there's other family moments. It's part, coming up with the story arc. There was initially we had a discussion early on about how prominent to make some of the musicians, and was our friend Sammy going to be too prominent, and that was a back and forth. And then how the music ebbs and flows, because there is like the ocean, there's the area above the surface of the water, which is the visuals, and then there's the depth of all the audio going on and how we orchestrated that. It just, it happened organically, and it was also, as David was saying, like getting comfortable with, his on-camera. Some of the narration was originally an on-camera interview. And then, we've got, with David's mother, and then the workers, and these chapters. So, it's a mosaic. You start, culling through things, and you're trying to make this story, and I teach editing, and sometimes it's like, yeah, what are the rules, because depending on which direction you go, there are a lot of avenues. So, in other words, I'm having a hard time answering the question. I don't know exactly how much footage was shot. I mean, you shot 2017, and then, and David's student from Emerson, because we get around, we teach Emerson, we teach, wherever we're like Papa was a Rolling Stone as far as editing and freelancing and teaching. But Andy Laub also came in and shot a bunch of stuff, and has worked on a lot of David's films. Anyway, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you. So, audience, I'm sure you have a question? Go ahead, fire away.
So I didn't know we were coming to see this movie, but I just read the article in the New York Times.
Here, wait, we're sending a mic over to you.
So my husband booked the tickets for this because we're big fans of this wonderful museum. And I didn't know we were coming to see this movie, and I actually had read the article in the New York Times. So it was like, I can't believe it. This is so great.
The Boston Globe, I think.
Oh, was it the Globe? Yeah, okay. It was something I read online. So anyway, I loved that we're here. I feel very fortuitous. I really have this huge sense that small business has always been the engine of America. And, we're in a time where big is the only thing ruling. And I kind of wish you thought about playing a little bit of the angle of what this small business did to sustain all the families that worked for you guys for years and years. And because I really feel like everyone that runs a small business and puts the sweat, even a company that you grow, and my husband and I both did this, you just work so hard. And anyone that creates jobs that are lasting, that can sustain people's families, are to me the heroes. And yet we don't really have enough being said about that. And it's particularly sad to me that this space that was so little that you occupied wasn't seen as completely relevant to the New York story and the heritage of New York and all the families that have built small businesses that have created that great city. Yeah. So did you think about going in that direction at all?
Well, it's a great question, and I really appreciate that. And you're right, at the heart, this is a story about a small business and the universe that this small business and all small businesses create. And what was really heartbreaking for me, in addition to this feeling of losing this place that I grew up in, losing a connection to my dad, losing this mooring of my family that would always gather on the big holidays to come together to sell flowers, it was losing these people I grew up with. That, I grew up with a lot of these guys. They knew me as a little kid. And having to see them lose their livelihoods was really painful and sad. And yet, it's a very New York story. That's and an American story on a lot of levels. You know, a lot of small businesses go as long as they can, and then they can't go any longer. And then there is the fallout of that.
Thank you, David. Other questions? Yes, right here. Wait for the mic. Thank you.
No, I just want to comment on I was struck immediately about that you're including the musicians and as such an integral part of your film. And as someone who spent lots of time in New York subways and in Penn Station, think of the combination of flowers and music in those subterranean places. It was just so identifying for that milieu, and I thought that integration was just wonderful. So
Thank you very much. You want to respond to that, David or Mark?
I'll just say thank you.
I'll respond. Because the other challenge was when you were cutting up all the interviews in the store, all that stuff had music. So you're jumping around with these interviews and you're hearing the flamenco guitarists, but of course that stuff is, jumping around. So we had to run all the interviews through a special EQ to bring out as much background noise as possible. So then we could bring in a consistent layer of the flamenco player, the electric guitar player, and then the poet was he was beautiful, but he was a challenge because he was like his poetry was longer than the film. We had to we had to.
It was a little all over the place. Yes.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Firstly, thank you for the beautiful film. Really, it's touching. How important do you think your educations were in making this film? Both filmmakers.
Well, as an undergraduate, I was a philosophy major, so I don't know if that played any role. And then I did a journalism master's program, which I don't know if it had anything to do with my ability to make this film. But my true education was taking his class, and maybe that sealed the deal. So in that sense, it was essential.
You need to tell the administration that BU.
Yeah.
Could you put that in?
Yes.
Well, there is an education that's ongoing because there's certain things that I feel more comfortable with, like some of the cinema verite stuff. And there's an ebb and flow of styles. So we have to learn to work together, and sometimes, I have a certain style that is maybe maybe less formal, and so these are the things you develop a relationship, and that's part of the education. I don't know. I could say the learning never stops.
I will answer that
And
more
that is true.
In another way. So actually, there is a real element of education in this, in at least my career as a filmmaker. So for most of my career, I was a newspaper reporter. And over the years, the Boston Globe, like a lot of other news organizations, had become more multimedia institutions, and I was encouraged to experiment with flip video cameras, which were these ancient things that predate cell phone cameras. And during that period, I did this thing where you get to spend a year. It's like nirvana for journalists. It's called a Nieman Fellowship. You go to Harvard and you can study anything you want. And I was lucky enough to get into this class with the filmmaker that Mark was just mentioning, this guy Ross McElwee, who is one of our region's towering figures in documentary filmmaking. And long story short, I was the only adult he didn't want. Mark was a little bit easier, but I had to kind of bribe my way into that class because he thought the fellows weren't going to do the work, and he wanted the undergrads in the class. Anyway, all the other undergrads knew how to use cameras. They were a lot better than I was. I was the only idiot who didn't know how to turn the time code off on the camera when I was filming. And for the final project for that class, I was making a short film about the first little person to run the Boston Marathon. And I spent a few months filming her, still really learning how to use a camera. And on the day of the marathon, I was up with her really early, and then I accompanied her I took the bus out to Hopkinton and shot her as she was crossing the starting line, and then I went to the halfway point, and then I went to the finish line. And as I was taking in this incredibly beautiful scene and waiting for what I thought was the triumphant finale for this class project, for this class, while I was on leave from the Globe, all of a sudden, about 20 steps from where I was standing, the first bomb exploded at the finish line of the Boston Marathon. And if you've ever seen any of the footage from the aftermath of that horrific attack, you've probably seen the footage I shot that day. And so all of a sudden, I had this totally different film that clearly took on another level. And it was this professor, Ross McElwee, who sat with me for hours, teaching me sort of the grammar of making films and helped me piece together this testament to that terrible moment. And that is what got me into making films. And from there, I kept going. I continued to shoot with this subject, and I spent a year filming her, and then ran the marathon with her the next year, and that led to my first feature film, which was called Undaunted. And then I was, really sucked into this medium, and it was around that time that I was watching John get yelled at by protesters in Gloucester and everywhere else, and I thought, and most of my career, and during that time, before the bombings, I was covering climate change and environmental issues and how our region's oceans are changing. And as I watched John get pilloried by the fishermen, and a lot of them ignoring the science, and John trying to find a balance between the commercial and the conservation interests, I thought there was a really interesting story, and that led to my first environmental film, Sacred Cod. And to this day, I thank John deeply for being, willing. He was I've interviewed and tried to cover lots of politicians and public servants over the years, and the vast majority of them, A, refuse to talk, B, send these manufactured statements that their PR handlers would give me. John always got on the phone with me, and John never shied away from answering the questions, maybe sometimes, but I eventually pushed him enough, and he would finally give me an honest answer, which is a great credit to him.
David is an amazing reporter, because you go into an interview with a reporter and you have kind of an adversarial but necessary relationship. And so you have, this is what I'm going to say. These are my talking points. I'm not saying anything else. And David would ask questions, and I would say what I intended to say. And then with David, he would get me to say what I never intended to say. That's a really good reporter. I have a kind of follow-up to your question, David, because as a reporter, and you are a great one, and as a filmmaker, also great, you're a storyteller. And you're communicating something to your readers or viewers. As you're thinking about how to tell a story, what is the difference between when you approach that from a journalism, print medium, and when you approach that from a film medium? Is there a difference in how you tell a story?
Well, I'd like to say in many ways no, because you are trying to always figure out how to distill the essence of something. What is the most sincere, compelling, meaningful, and clear way of telling a story? And that goes for either medium. But of course, they're very different mediums. And for many years before I took that class during my fellowship, I had a prejudice against the visual medium. I kind of thought of visual storytelling as a means of dumbing down information and just really reducing nuance to platitudes and black and white, and not really having the ability to plumb the depths. And also, this medium can be incredibly manipulative, and it is very dangerous. With music, with visual imagery, you can seduce someone, a viewer, in ways that inure them to facts, blind them, and compel them in a way, lead them to a narrative that might be completely bullshit. And it is an incredibly powerful vehicle of propaganda. But for the most part, I looked at TV news and thought, this is really shit. Why would anyone want to tell a story in this way? And then some years ago, before that fellowship, I did this story where we just hired our first visual reporter, our first video reporter at the Boston Globe. And I was working on this story about people who live aboard boats on Boston Harbor throughout the winter, so-called liveaboards. And I thought I had this really compelling story about these idiosyncratic characters who live in these frigid conditions, often with dangerous space heaters, and had great stories about people tripping on ice and taking a plunge in the icy waters. And then this reporter, this video reporter, her story, when she was accompanying me, I was like, I thought she was kind of a nuisance. Like, why do I need this other person following me around? She's kind of interfering with the story. What is it going to do that I can't say in words? And her story, her short film, was published accompanying mine at the top of my story, which was another source of indignation. And when I watched it, I was frankly blown away, because she was able to show things that I could only hint at with words. She was able to use this medium, this dangerous medium, in an incredibly visceral and effective way. Rather than talking about the howling winds, you could hear the howling winds. You could hear the boat creaking against the dock. You could see how cold it was, because you could see the exhaled breath. You could feel how sort of dismal this existence, because you could see the sallow light, or the cramped conditions when she opened up the head of the boat, the bathroom of the boat, and that was where the subject was a he, and that's where his closet was. And there were all these things that the videographer, was able to show, and I was just really moved by that. And so, again, another long-winded answer, but that really clued me into the power of this medium. And when you use it in the right way, you can tell a story in another that can transport people.
We have time for a last question. Nelson?
I don't even know if it's a question, honestly, but this is an amazing family love story. But the way that the love ripples out from these little flowers in the catacombs and includes the entire family of Penn Station wrapped around your family in these waves, and of course the acoustic waves. It's just, I'm sure there's a great deal of intentionality in that, but if you could speak a bit about how you built upon family and created this extraordinary little Penn Station, or not little, but enormous Penn Station family that was moved and motivated by the idea of this business of peddling these flowers underground, and peddling with a D in this case.
Well, thank you for those comments, and I appreciate the question. Maybe I'll try to answer it by going back to John's original question about the challenges of telling this story, and I'll answer it maybe start off answering it in this way. So when I show a film, now I often leave because I've seen it so many times. I get really annoyed because there are little things that I always want to change. It bothers me. But with this film, it brings me home. It's a safe place. And it is that love that you're describing, this world, this universe that has changed irrevocably in so many ways because Penn Station has changed. It's this kind of shiny place now. There's Chick-fil-A's and Starbucks and Wagamamas, and it's just comforting, really, to just in a darkened theater be transported just for me to be back in that place. And so on that level, it was a lot. I'm so grateful to Mark for helping me, hold on to this world and hopefully share that love and this distinct universe with a wider audience. Thank you.
I just chiming in on that. I have been calling it a labor of love story, and when we got into the material, I'm like, this is literally a mom and pop shop, and that is an American story. And then yes, the crush of people is the fabric of the story as well. So, thank you.
Both David and Mark have said how they continually get educated by this process, and I try to get educated as well through experiences like press conferences. And one of the things I've learned in press conferences is you always ask for one too many questions because the last question is a killer. And this audience, based on the questions you've already asked, you're pretty smart folks, and I don't want to risk that last question. So we are going to adjourn to the Jacobs Gallery for refreshments and continued conversation with Mark and David, and please give them another well-deserved round of applause. Thank you, David. You were great.
Thank you.